Emma, a 35-year-old housewife, had been married to Stephen, a company employee, for 10 years. They had a daughter in elementary school. Since Stephen worked for a trading company and traveled frequently, it had been tough when their daughter was small. However, Stephen frequently called them via video from his business trips, so their daughter adored her father, and Emma didn't feel lonely. They were a happy family of 3. Despite their peaceful daily life, Emma sometimes felt depressed. A mom friend named Candace, who lived in the same apartment building and whose child went to the same kindergarten, constantly harassed her. They were on the PTA together and had been close for a long time, but something had caused Candace to start hating Emma. Emma tried hard to mend their relationship, but Candace's harassment only escalated. One day, she set a terrifying trap for Emma. The trigger for Candace's hostility was when Emma and Stephen bought a house. They had been living in the same rental housing as Candace, but when their daughter started elementary school, they purchased a new single-family home. They stretched their budget a bit, but they felt it was the right decision. The new house was in an excellent location, close to a supermarket and the station. It also had a large yard where their daughter could play freely. Emma was grateful to her hard-working husband and determined to work even harder on housework and childcare. However, Candace didn't like that. She suddenly became cold when they moved. At first, Emma was confused, as she didn't understand why Candace had changed. They used to visit each other's homes frequently, but Candace began ignoring Emma's greetings and sometimes glared at her with hatred. Emma finally understood the reason during their children's entrance ceremony. As Emma was leaving the school, Candace whispered in her ear, "Just because you bought a house, you think you're better than everyone else. You're such a smug woman." Then she said, "I thought you were my friend, but I'm disappointed," and walked away. Being hated by someone she considered a friend was shocking. Emma had never boasted about their new home and wanted to stay friends even after their children started elementary school. She tried to mend their relationship by smiling and talking to Candace, but her attitude didn't change. Candace even started spreading false rumors among other mom friends, saying Emma was getting arrogant after buying a house and looking down on those who didn't own a house. Fortunately, no one believed her, and some friends sympathized with Emma, saying it was tough having someone like that targeting her. Though the other moms were sensible, Emma was always anxious about when Candace might spread another rumor. She spent restless days. Luckily, her daughter's elementary school had a large number of students, so their children never ended up in the same class. Eventually, Candace stopped bothering Emma. By the time her daughter was in 3rd grade, Emma had completely forgotten about Candace and regained a peaceful life. But she had underestimated Candace's tenacity. Candace had been secretly plotting something terrible. One morning, Emma was cleaning the house after sending her daughter to school. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. When she answered the intercom, she saw 2 uniformed men on the monitor. A police car was parked in front of the house. "Why are the police here?" Emma was startled but calmed herself, thinking maybe there was an incident in the neighborhood and they were here for an inquiry. "It's okay. There's nothing to panic about," she told herself and slowly opened the front door. One of the officers asked, "Is your husband at home?" It seemed they weren't here for her, but for her husband. She started to explain that he wasn't home. "My husband is not at home," she said, but then the officer's next words shocked her so much that she almost felt her heart stop. The officer said, "Your husband is suspected of molestation." "My husband? Suspected of molestation?" She shouted involuntarily but quickly covered her mouth with both hands. If the neighbors found out her husband was suspected of molestation, it would be a disaster. The police said a woman had accused him of touching her inappropriately on a train, but her husband could never do such a thing. She insisted there must be a mistake. However, the officer said, "If you hide him, you'll be arrested too." Emma was at a loss, knowing her husband was innocent. Then, a woman appeared from behind the officers. It was Candace, smirking as she watched them. Emma thought she was just being a nosy onlooker, but she wasn't ignoring the officers. She barged into the house and said, "If you don't want him arrested, I might consider settling for some compensation money." It was Candace who had reported Stephen for molestation. The officers seemed troubled by her sudden mention of a settlement, but she continued, I was really scared at that time, she said, beginning to describe the molestation incident with a pained expression. According to her, she was on a train when someone suddenly touched her. She almost screamed but recognized the face of the perpetrator, Stephen. She thought about turning him over to the station staff but hesitated since he was her friend's husband. Before she could decide, he disappeared into the crowd at the next station. So, she decided to report it to the police later. Then, with tearful eyes and trembling, she pointed at Emma. "Molestation is a heinous crime, officer. Arrest this woman too." Indeed, if Candace had been molested, her fear and desire to catch the perpetrator would be understandable. And if Emma were hiding the criminal, she might be just as guilty. But Candace's case was different. It was clear Stephen couldn't have committed the molestation. To fabricate a crime and even act poorly about it, what was she thinking? Emma resolved to thoroughly expose this lying woman. "All right, time to get serious," Emma thought. "I won't hold back." "I'm sorry to trouble you by coming all the way here," Emma said to the officers. "My husband has been overseas on assignment for 3 years. Overseas? The officers were dumbfounded. He had been away from the country for 3 long years, just after we built our new home. He was ordered by his company to work overseas, Emma explained. The moment she heard about it from him, her world went dark. It's common to hear about people being transferred right after buying a house, but his assignment was overseas. Moreover, it wasn't a country they could easily travel to, and this time it seemed like a long-term assignment, unlike his usual business trips. Though she was used to him being away due to his frequent overseas trips, she was deeply disappointed since their dream home was just completed. However, they couldn't refuse the company's order. She considered moving overseas with their family, but since their daughter had already completed her school enrollment and had many close friends in the neighborhood, she said, "I want to go to school with my friends." So, Emma decided to stay in the country with their daughter. As soon as they moved into the new house, they started living as just the two of them. Living alone in a large house was initially quite unsettling. However, they communicated with Stephen through video calls almost daily. Thanks to the spacious new home, Emma was able to enjoy her hobby of gardening, so it wasn't as lonely as she had expected. "That's why he has never lived in our new home," Emma continued. "He's been overseas for 3 years. So, my husband can't have committed any groping on a domestic train." Right when she said this, both police officers looked puzzled and tilted their heads. Naturally, the most flustered person upon hearing this was Candace. She exclaimed, "That's a lie. It must be a lie that your husband is overseas. I saw him with my own eyes. The culprit is your husband." Her face turned bright red as she shouted. Emma was boiling with anger at Candace for still accusing Stephen of groping at this point, but with the police involved, proving his innocence was the most important thing. "So," she said calmly, "shall I call my husband directly then?" and took out her smartphone from her apron pocket. There was a high chance he wouldn't be able to answer if he was working, but it was nighttime where he was, just around the end of his workday. The police officers still looked troubled, and Candace had a strained look on her face, but Emma went ahead and called Stephen on video. As she prayed, "Please pick up the phone," her prayers were answered when he responded immediately. Seeing his face, Emma felt relieved and told him everything. That he was being accused of groping, that one of her friends was claiming he had touched her on a train. Initially baffled by the sudden mention of groping, Stephen listened to Emma's story with a frown. But once he saw the police on the video call, he quickly understood the situation. He spoke to the officers. "As you can see, I'm not in the country, so I couldn't have committed groping." Then, he moved the phone away from his face to show the scenery outside his window. The screen displayed an exotic cityscape and a dark sky, clearly indicating a foreign country. It was not a domestic scene. "If necessary, I can show you my passport," he said. "I've been abroad for 3 years. He took out his passport from a nearby bag and showed the stamped pages. "If you still don't believe me, you can investigate further if you like." The police officer, looking apologetic, said, "No, that's quite all right. Thank you for your cooperation." When Emma ended the video call, the officer turned to Candace with a stern face. "So, what is the meaning of this?" Having witnessed the interaction, Candace was already pale with wide eyes. She stammered, but I didn't know her husband was overseas. I saw him. Her voice trembled. It was practically a confession. Emma stepped closer to Candace and demanded, "Then why did you think it was my husband? You said you saw him with your own eyes, right? Don't tell me it was a case of mistaken identity." Candace snapped back. "It's all your fault," she yelled, even as the officers looked on in astonishment. "You bought a house and acted all high and mighty. Who do you think you are? I thought we were apartment buddies, but you betrayed me. I wanted to make you suffer, so I framed your husband." She ranted furiously. Her selfish words left Emma and the officer speechless. Holding a grudge because Emma now owned a house, Candace had tried to frame Stephen for groping, hoping to get settlement money. This was beyond harassment. Fortunately, since Stephen was abroad, they avoided a false accusation. But if he had been in the country and on that train, it could have been disastrous. Emma had heard that proving innocence is very difficult once accused of groping. False accusations are unacceptable. However, Candace didn't understand the gravity of her actions. Despite her rage, she suddenly put on a casual face and said, "Well, let's say it was my mistake this time. I just wanted to teach a cheeky woman a lesson." Emma was infuriated by her blatant disregard for decency. "We'll see who gets punished," she said. "What did you say?" Candace screeched, grabbing at Emma again, but the police officers restrained her and took her away. Sometime later, Candace's husband came to apologize. He told Emma that Candace was arrested for a false accusation and given a suspended sentence. He had been concerned about her bad-mouthing Emma but never imagined she would falsely accuse Stephen. He was deeply shocked, tearing up as he apologized profusely. He also declared that he would divorce Candace. She constantly nagged him to earn more and complained about their apartment. He had grown tired of her, and this incident was the last straw. Candace was now completely alone, with no job history and a criminal record. She would struggle in society, but that was her own doing. Emma was mostly worried about Candace's child, but she learned that the child was now with the grandparents and attending school happily, which was a relief. As for Emma, nearly having her husband framed by a jealous friend was a close call. Recently, Stephen told her he might return soon. Emma and their daughter were eagerly awaiting his return and planned to continue living happily in their beloved home. Let's conclude the story shortly. Stephen returned home a few months later, greeted by his overjoyed wife and daughter. The ordeal had brought them closer, and they cherished their time together even more. Candace, meanwhile, faded into obscurity, her life a cautionary tale of the destructive power of jealousy and deceit. Emma, though shaken by the experience, emerged stronger, her faith in her family and her strength solidified. Life continued, filled with the ordinary joys and challenges of family life, but with a renewed appreciation for the preciousness of each moment. As for the house, it remained a symbol of their love and resilience, a home where they could truly be themselves, free from the shadows of the past. Thanks for watching. How did you find the story? Let me know in the comments below. Remember to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more awesome stories like this. Your feedback and support mean a lot.